Welcome, everybody, to Black and Gold Weekly. It's a weekly Boston Bruins show here on YouTube, part of Black and Gold Productions. I want to give a big thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at BNG Productions for allowing this show to happen. We wouldn't be here without them, so big thank you to them. And as you can see, Danny is back. We are ready to go for another show here. Episode 53 of BNG Weekly. We have reached the All-Star break in the NHL season. It's kind of it's a big checkpoint throughout the year. It's one of those times of the year where everybody just kind of takes a look, reflects on the season so far, looks at where teams are at, and we're going to be doing that today with the Boston Bruins, as well as looking at their last week of games, this last road trip that they had, and then their final game before the break against Seattle. And then at the end, we're going to be looking ahead to the upcoming games next week that they have, because what was supposed to be the Olympic break obviously is not now, and they'll be playing these makeup games that were postponed from earlier in the year throughout the what was supposed to be Olympic break. So we got some more hockey coming up and some more to talk about. But Danny, welcome back. Thank you so much for being on again and ready for another episode talking about Bruins hockey.
Thank you for having me. We are on the Sean Corrali number of episodes here in this one, and let me tell you, it was a very interesting week. Certainly not what I expected, but as we'll get into a little bit later, then again, I kind of did expect it when you really factor in the bigger picture.
Yeah. Definitely. So there's a lot to talk about here. Before we get going, I do just want to remind everybody about the links down in the description of the video. If you're in the market for Boston Bruins apparel, NHL apparel from any of the teams, or NCAA college apparel, there are 3 links down in the description of the video. They've got a great variety of products, all the usual stuff like hats and shirts and jerseys, hoodies, all of that, but a bunch of other accessory products as well, all team branded, great stuff to look at. And if you're in the market for any of those things, looking for something with a team branding, please check out those links. It really does help out a lot and is very much appreciated. But we're going to get into it now, Danny. And I guess to start, we'll go through the last few games before we start taking a look at the bigger picture and everything as a whole. Bruins last few games since we last recorded included, the 3-game road trip, Colorado, Arizona, Dallas, and then the one last home game against the Seattle Kraken before the break. So let's go back to the Colorado game, because I'm sure we're both going to have a lot to say about this one. Bruins Avalanche. Going into this game, if you watched last week's show, we were not expecting the Bruins to win this game. We were basically chalking this one up as a loss before it even started. Colorado was absolutely on fire. Massive home winning streak. Almost undefeated in their last 10 games heading into this game. Like, Colorado was tearing it up. We did not expect the Bruins to win this game. However, when the Bruins went into the third period with a 3-1 lead, I was surprised. But at that point, I did expect the Bruins to win the game, because there's really no excuse for not winning a game when you're up by 2 goals in the third period. However, Boston decides to turn into the Toronto Maple Leafs for a period, blows the 3-1 lead, and then loses in overtime 4-3 on a goal by Cale Makar. Overall, this was a very frustrating game. I stayed up till 1 in the morning to watch this team blow a 3-1 lead and lose in overtime. But on the same token, they did get a point out of the game, and I wasn't expecting them to get anything out of this one. But on the other hand, they blew a 3-1 lead. It was an embarrassing loss. It was a game that they absolutely should have won. And I had overall very mixed feelings and left this game feeling very frustrated. How about you?
Frustrated is an absolutely great word. I mean, to be honest with you, like you said, we talked about it in last week's show. We didn't think this game was going to be much of a contest. We thought the Avalanche were going to live up to their name and just pour an avalanche of goals all over Boston. But that didn't end up happening. The Bruins actually played pretty well. I believe they outshot Colorado 11-3 in the first period, so they brought the energy.
Mm-hmm.
They brought the energy to compete with Colorado. We saw goal contributions from Charlie Coyle and Jake DeBrusk, two
Yep.
guys that we've really kind of seen their play pick up. And I believe Brad Marchand scored in that one as well. So it was another kind of balanced scoring night. It wasn't just the big three.
Yep.
And, I thought the Bruins had a chance to win this game. As a matter of fact, I remember texting you, and this is
Yep.
probably why they lost. We are going to look so stupid recording next week's show when the Bruins win. And then I was kind of waiting for Colorado to bring on that scoring threat, that scoring again avalanche, and they
Mm-hmm.
did. Um, they just completely kind of sort of got comfortable and found their groove, and I think that's the mark of a good team.
Yep.
Even when they're down, they're confident in their ability to come back and get back into the game, and that's exactly what they did. They didn't panic. They just stuck to their game, and one of the things that I kind of really made me think in this game is that any chance for a team like the Colorado Avalanche, meaning any shot you give them,
Mm-hmm.
any, face off is a good chance that works in their favor because they're the type of team that has the talent to make every possession, every chance, every shot count.
Yep.
And they certainly did that on Wednesday. And I was very mad that I stayed up till 1 a.m. and I said, John, I'm going to bed. I left John's stream that he was doing. I said, the Bruins are winning. I'm going to go to bed. And next thing I know, I had to tune in again because the Avalanche started scoring, and then it was all literally downhill from there.
Yeah, I remember. So Boston scored all of their goals in the second period.
They did.
And I remember watching the second period being like, wow, like, where did this Bruins team come from? Like, I can't believe they're playing this well. And after they went up 3-1, you texted me and you were like, dude, we're going to look so stupid when the show comes out on Friday because we literally talked about how the Bruins weren't going to win this game and this was an expected loss. And here they are beating the Avalanche 3-1. And I was like, yeah, this probably isn't going to go. This isn't going to sound too good when the show comes out. And then all of a sudden, Colorado scores twice in the third period. Boston has absolutely nothing for them in the third and ties the game at 3. And then overtime comes around, and obviously at that point, both teams had already gotten a point. It was just who's going to get the second point. And Colorado gets a power play. Cale Makar rips it home. Beautiful shot.
Beautiful
and
shot.
The game is over. And all of a sudden, we don't look as dumb about this game because Boston did end up losing in OT, though. So I'm happy that they got a point, but very not happy that they blew a 3-1 lead in the third period because that is not the mark of a good team. That's a Maple Leafs type thing to do.
And I hate to say it, but that's peak playoff Bruins right there. Getting my hopes up just to inevitably let me down once again. And I will say, because this was a huge play of the night, Taylor Hall's hit, in my opinion, was a good hockey play. I forget who he hit. Was it
McKinnon?
McKinnon. And that was a good hockey play. I think McKinnon's stick actually got the better of him. I think it was a self-inflicted stick. And I know Hall was a marked man on the ice after that hit. I think they said he got hit like 5 or 6 times throughout the course of the game. But it just felt like a playoff hockey game again. And it was kind of a good test to see how the Bruins would play against, a tough Western Conference opponent. They did all right. They just couldn't finish the job. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, the Taylor Hall hit looked really, really bad at first. And I remember
in full time,
when I first saw it, I was like, oh boy, like this is suspension coming. This was a pure headshot. He just caught him right across the middle, right on the chin. McKinnon was bleeding all over the ice. I was like, this looks bad. But then you saw the slowed down replay, and it was actually Nathan McKinnon's own stick that hit him in the face and broke his nose and caused the major injury that McKinnon suffered. So Hall didn't actually do anything wrong there. And then he was chased around the rest of the night. I mean,
He
Colorado
was.
was all over him. Landeskog multiple times tried to get him to fight. Eric Johnson took the cross-checking penalty, just wailing on the back of Taylor Hall at one point during the second period. Yeah, he was a marked man for the rest of the game. And these two teams play again coming up this month, I think February 21st. And I have a feeling Hall is probably going to be marked again in that game as well when they play again. So at the end of the day, it looked really bad at first. It looked really bad in real time, and it was really unfortunate that McKinnon got injured because I love Nathan McKinnon. He's a great
Yeah.
player, one of the best centers in the league. And, you never want to see a guy get hurt like that. But Taylor Hall didn't do anything wrong. It was McKinnon's own stick that hit him in the face and broke his nose and caused the injury. So, yeah, just an unfortunate play there. But that ramped up the intensity of that game after that hit. And obviously that was early on. It was like McKinnon's second shift.
Mm.
But all of a sudden, the rest of that game really got amped up from how it started, and it kind of had that playoff style feel to it for the rest of the way. And then obviously it being a close game even ramped up the intensity even more.
Yeah, the building was absolutely rocking. And just to kind of get back to that hit for a quick second, shout out to the referees for taking the time to assess, review the tape, and make the right call, because the building obviously wanted a 5-minute major and an injection, but the referees didn't let the emotion of the moment get to them. They watched the tape and made their correct call. So it was a good hit because it was a legal hit, but it was a bad hit because I think it woke up the Avalanche a little bit. And then you started to really see them skate well. And that was kind of, I don't want to say the turning point of the game, but it kind of, like you said, woke up the hibernating bear, so to speak. Except I wish the Bruins woke up and finished the job, but
Yeah.
I digress, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a game the Bruins should have finished off. I mean, just there's no excuse. I don't care who you are or who you're playing. There's no reasonable excuse to lose a game that you're up by 2 goals in the third period. It's just you blew it. You just flat out blew it. And yes, Colorado's a great team, but the Bruins blew it. And
They did.
they only get 1 point out of it instead of 2. And then that was only game 1 of the road trip. So they have to go, and Friday night they play in Arizona. And Coyotes here gave them a tough game. Very tough game here in Arizona. Ends up Bruins just squeak out a 2-1 victory over the Coyotes. And honestly, this was a game that the Bruins probably should have won by more. Should have played better. It was definitely not their best game. But because it's Arizona, they're still able to squeak it out. They win the game. And overall, they pick up the 2 points in a game that they absolutely had to have the 2 points. But it certainly wasn't pretty against the Coyotes.
No, and you kind of you see a lot of it in sports where a team really gets up and plays well for a tough opponent, and then they kind of suffer a little bit of a trap game, so to speak. And I think that's exactly what happened here. You also talk about the fatigue, going back to the fact that the Bruins played 16 games in 30 days of the month of January. So I think that might have had a piece, might have been a piece of the puzzle for their kind of difficult performance. But at the end of the day, they won, and this was a good game to see them really kind of persevere in the face of adversity when they really struggled. And yes, it's Arizona, but still they were able to get a win and kind of balance out the road trip a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this was obviously a game that was fully expected to be a win for the Bruins. I mean, anyone who's playing Arizona expects to win. And they didn't make it easy on themselves, but they did pull out the win. Eric Haula got a goal. Charlie McAvoy got the game winner in the second period. Allmark in goal played really, really well. Stopped 30 out of 31 shots. Was obviously a huge reason why the Bruins won this game. And, they did what it took, I guess, but you would have liked to seen them be a little bit more convincing against a team like the Coyotes. However, they probably were pretty tired at this point because they did have a very, very busy January. We'll talk about, the month as a whole in a little while, but they were playing a lot of games in a short period of time.
17th straight win over the Coyotes, so at least they kept some sort of streak going
Yeah.
there. And this was, like you said, it wasn't a pretty win, but it was a win that they needed to have. And honestly, it was one of the highlights of the team's most recent games, as the next game following the Arizona game would not be a pretty one.
Yeah, definitely not. One last thing about the Arizona game is that we had another incident here with a Bruins star player getting roughed up and nobody really doing anything about it. And it's happened with Bergeron earlier in the year. We've seen it with some other guys. This time it was Charlie McAvoy getting absolutely mugged by Antoine Roussel. And basically Boston not doing anything about it. And this is something that I'm really getting frustrated with. And I think a lot of Bruins fans, especially if you remember back to, most of the Bruins' good teams have been really tough teams. Certainly that 2011 team was tough as
Yep.
nails. Just the Bruins in general, that's their history. They put a tough team on the ice. And this year we've seen multiple times where star players are getting roughed up and nobody's really doing anything about it. And I just wanted, do you think that this team needs to add some sort of toughness here at the trade deadline or something, or bring in somebody that can do something about this? Because I'm kind of sick of watching star players get beat up and nobody have anything to say about it.
It's a very fair question because when I watch the games and I see the games, the toughness guy in my mind on the roster right now is Derek Forbort. I
Yeah.
mean, he can throw down the gloves, but he, and I'm not just saying he, but the entire Bruins team lacks that kind of same, toughness mentality. And I don't think it's because they don't care about their teammate, honestly. I just think it's a product of today's National Hockey League. Now, like if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna get on my soapbox real quick, but it's now about flash and goals. It's not about toughness. It's
Mm-hmm.
about the pretty passes and who can score the most points. And if that's the direction the game is going, fine. But the days of a true enforcer and sticking up for your teammates. I mean, yes, they can stick up for their teammates and they should stick up for their teammates, but it's not something that you see too much in the league anymore. And it's not just the Bruins, it's just the way the game is played. It's more of a every man for himself mentality. So I think what you see is what you're going to get, and the fans that want that kind of toughness back in the game of hockey, I think are going to be very disappointed because you've even talked about, I remember you talking about it last year, how there were little fights and, you used to do a fight tracker on Twitter and there weren't a lot of entries
Mm-hmm.
in the fight tracker. And you and I have had conversations off air about this. So do I think the Bruins need to address this at the trade deadline? I mean, no. I mean, I think honestly, this is just a game of hockey today. I don't think it's a Bruins problem. I think it's a league problem, a game problem, and I think hockey now is more about scoring goals, and it's an offensive minded game. It's kind of like football now. Football, especially college football, is turning into an offensive minded game, and I think you're going to see the toughness really sort of weeded out and more of an every man for himself mentality, and I think it's going to be up to the players to adjust.
Putting the team enforcing duties on Derek Forbort, who
Yeah,
has 7 career fights, is really, really unfair, I think, to Derek Forbort.
not ideal.
Having Trent Frederick and Nick Foligno both out of the lineup, I definitely think hurts from this standpoint because those are kind of your two guys that are there to do that and are going to be the kind of guys that do that and stand up for their teammates and have that role filled with their presence in the lineup. And obviously both of those guys are out injured right now, so that doesn't help. But overall, I mean, Boston actually has 15 fights this year, which is 8th in the NHL. Fighting's actually back up this year by a pretty decent amount. I'm on hockeyfights.com right now. Fights are up this year by a pretty decent amount compared to the way it had been trending for the past 2 to 3 years. Nashville has 29 fights this season, leads the NHL. Anaheim has 22 and Arizona has 20. Those are your top 3 teams. Nashville and Anaheim are both playoff teams. Arizona, obviously, furthest thing from it. But, I think, especially when you get into the playoffs and you get playoff-style hockey being played, you've got to be able to protect your teammates, and you've got to be able to protect yourself and stand up for yourself. And looking at the playoff teams and looking at the overall toughness around the league, most playoff teams have guys that I would not mess with. And I don't know if the Bruins have that guy in the lineup that I would not mess with. And,
No.
Washington's got Wilson and Hathaway and some tough guys like that. The Rangers brought in Ryan Reeves. I mean, he's as tough as they come in the NHL. Carolina, probably similar to the Bruins, where they don't have that guy that I wouldn't mess with. I don't think Carolina is an overly tough team. They're actually fewest fights in the NHL this year belongs to Carolina. Tampa Bay's fairly tough. Florida's actually really tough. They've got some guys that can throw. It's just you can't let your star players get pushed around. And I look at a lot of these other playoff teams, and they're not going to let their star players get pushed around. They don't. They have tough guys in the lineup. And, even Colorado's got, Landeskog, who's the captain and a first-line player, is one of their biggest fighters this year. I mean, he's a pure power forward, and he's one of their biggest fighters this season. And they've also got Curtis McDermott, who, again, is one of the toughest guys left in the NHL. I see a lacking there, and I think Boston's in danger of getting physically pushed around if they don't fix that. Now, can they fix it from within? Absolutely. I mean, we've seen Carlo get more physical this year, and I think that's a good step in the right direction for Brandon Carlo. Obviously, Forbert's a big boy; he can handle himself. And I think if you can get Frederic and Foligno back into that lineup, if you can have Lazar step up more physically, because he's a big kid, I think Boston can find it from within, but they just have to have the willingness to do it. Like, if you see your teammate getting pushed around, step in and do something about it. I think that's the biggest thing with Boston, but I certainly wouldn't be opposed to them bringing in a fourth-line guy at the deadline or in a smaller trade where, if they've got to throw somebody on that fourth line, or even in as an extra forward that only plays if he's needed, adding something there, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it, because you can't have Charlie McAvoy getting roughed up by Antoine Roussel. I mean, that is... You got to stand up better than that. As a team, you can't have your number one defenseman being pushed around by a fourth-line, borderline useless player for a non-playoff team in Arizona.
I agree. And my point really was that I don't mean to make it sound like the Bruins don't care about McAvoy or whatever, but I think you're seeing more and more a shift away from fighting. I know the numbers are up this year, but generally speaking, fighting hasn't been as prevalent as it used to be. I remember you said Nashville was the leader with 29 fights. Yeah. I remember seeing 29 fights in a week, 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, it's not even close to where it was 10 years ago.
So, and I think with the playoffs, the emotions are obviously going to run higher. You're going to have Frederic and Foligno back, so I think it will change. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. So I think it will change. But the Bruins, it seems like ever since the trade of, Sean Thornton to Florida, I think it was, it seems like they lost their, goon, for lack of a better word.
They haven't had a true enforcer since Sean Thornton.
Yeah. Once he left, then, it seemed like, everything was, or the Bruins were a little bit softer, but I don't know. We'll see. I think it's an interesting question. I think it's a fair question. and hopefully by the time the playoffs come around,
Hmm.
the Bruins will kind of be able to throw their weight around a little bit more. Because, like you said, they can be physical. It's just as has been with this Bruins team on a whole, inconsistency.
Yeah. There's a few guys out there that I think Boston could kind of make a push for, and I just don't know if because a lot of them are on playoff teams who obviously aren't going to look to give up toughness before the playoffs. So like Nick Delorier from Anaheim, for example, I think would have been an awesome fourth liner, but Anaheim's not going to give him up. He's a huge fan favorite there, and a guy that locker room loves having around. So I don't think Delorier's going anywhere. Keegan Kolasar, a young kid from Vegas, is another guy that I would love to see if the Bruins could add him to the fourth line, but Vegas isn't going to give him up. He's been a really solid fourth liner for them, and he kind of allowed Vegas to get rid of Reeves and allowed
Mhm.
them to move on from Ryan Reeves, who's obviously much older, and Kolasar's kind of come in and been that fourth line guy who's with the willingness to drop the gloves. So I don't know if there's even a lot of options out there for the Bruins if they did want to try and add somebody. I think it really needs to come from within. And it needs to be a willingness among the Bruins players to say, we're not going to be pushed around. In some games, they've done it. I mean, look at the Minnesota game. That was a nasty game. Now, Frederick was there for that one, and Frederick was involved in pretty much everything physically in that game. And so, again, him being out of the lineup definitely doesn't help. But I don't know. I don't think you can have your star players being pushed around. Teams are going to take advantage of that every single time, especially
We're
in the playoffs.
yeah, and we're at the point in the calendar year where teams that are in the playoffs who don't need to make moves won't make moves. So that certainly handcuffs the Bruins, I think,
Yeah.
a little bit, and it puts them in a tough spot. So I agree with you. I think it's going to have to come from within, and hopefully when Frederick comes back and Foligno comes back, we will see the physicality ramp up a little bit. But I do think it's a fair question, and I do think it's a fair complaint. And we'll have to see how it pans out because if the Bruins can't throw their weight around physically, they're going to be eliminated quickly in the playoffs.
Yeah, if they get Florida in the first round, which honestly I think there's a good chance that they get Florida in the first round, that's not going to go well for the Bruins. I mean, Radko Gudas, Sam Bennett, Mason Marchment, Ryan Lomberg. I could go on with the tough guys on the Florida Panthers. And physically, we saw what an absolute war their playoff series with Tampa Bay last year was. If they bring that mentality to playing the Bruins, I don't think Boston's going to win that battle physically.
And I don't think Boston honestly wins that series because they
No.
are as complete a team as you can find. I mean, they're fun to watch. They don't get enough respect because they're in
Florida's a top
Florida.
3 team in the league
Yeah.
this year, without a doubt.
Alexander Barkov. I mean, they're fun to watch. They really are.
Yep.
And it's been a long time since the Florida Panthers. Well, not a long time, but it's been a few years since the Florida Panthers really had this exciting a team, and I'm happy for them honestly because it just brings more parity into the league.
Yeah, definitely. Florida's going to be a really tough team. But anyway, kind of went off on a tangent there.
Yeah.
But it's because, I mean, McAvoy getting roughed up by a career fourth liner is kind of an embarrassing look for the Bruins. And it's something that they can't let happen. It can't happen.
And this is going to be a big storyline for the Bruins in the playoffs too. Can they bring that physicality? Can they bring that extra juice, to really assert themselves? And yes, we did go off on a tangent, but I really do think it's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, so all right, we'll move on to this absolute debacle in Dallas now. Now I didn't
Yeah.
watch this game. Thank God I didn't watch this game. I was watching football, and I'm very glad I was because this looked like it was an absolute disaster from start to finish for the Bruins. Everything that I saw on Twitter was about how bad the defense was in this game. So this is another area. This is to me has been the number one area of concern about the Bruins has been that their decor is not good enough to be a true contender. They're not good enough on the back end to be a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. Are they going to make the playoffs? Yes. Are they a playoff team? Absolutely. Are they a team that can win a Stanley Cup? Not with their roster currently how it is. No, they're not good enough to win a Stanley Cup. They're not going to beat Tampa. They're not going to beat Florida. They're not going to beat Carolina. They're probably not going to beat Pittsburgh. There's a lot of teams in the East that are better than the Bruins. And this was another one of those games where it's just like, we thought we saw the worst of it with the Carolina game a couple weeks ago, but now they put up another complete stinker just like that one. And this 6-1 loss, just absolute drubbing from Dallas. And Dallas, quite frankly, isn't even that good of a team.
No, and to make matters worse, Tyler Seguin scored 2 goals, so
Yeah,
that
3-point
was
night.
he did, and that was some salt on the wound, and it was just a mess. I too was watching football, but I was able to watch the highlights after, and the shots, there wasn't a huge disparity in shots. You think a score like 6-1, there would be a huge amount of shots in favor of Dallas, but I believe Dallas only had 29 and the Bruins had 26.
Yep.
Yeah, so there wasn't even a huge disparity of shots. It was just a lack of defense, and the Dallas Stars playmakers came to play. And, this was just another frustrating game. And you want to have games like Carolina and Dallas, maybe, once every 2 months or so. If
once
you really
or twice
a
season, maybe.
And now we've had 2 in 2 weeks, or 2 in 3 weeks rather. But
yeah.
So this was just another kind of sleepy Sunday game. It seems like the Bruins do not do well on Sundays. So, because I remember there was the Washington game in April last year on a Sunday, and I don't know, the Bruins just don't do well on Sundays. But in any event, they kind of slept their way through this one, and then the defensive problems that we've had all season really reared their ugly head again. And yeah, we were talking about off air before the show that this Bruins team kind of confused us a little bit, and this game in particular was a real head scratcher.
Yeah. Good news, Boston only has 2 Sunday games the entire rest of the season.
Yes.
And they both come in April towards the end of the year. So, very good news there that Bruins only have 2 more Sunday games, because for whatever reason, Sunday is not their day. They have a lot of Saturday games, though, and quite a few of those Saturday games are afternoon ones, I believe. Actually, no, not as many as I thought. Only 3 or 4 of them are afternoon games. All right, whatever. We're, again, going on a tangent a little bit here, but... So yeah, Dallas was just a debacle. Defense didn't show up. Team didn't show up. Disaster of a game. Goaltending was not the main problem, but still couldn't steal the game or anything. So we move on. They come back home. That finishes up their road trip. They're 1-1-1 on the road trip, which is fine. Yeah, that was probably pretty much what I was expecting. Although I thought that the Colorado game would not have been one of the ones that they got a point out of, but either way, they're 1-1-1 on the road trip. They come back home. Last game before the All-Star break, Tuesday night, Boston against Seattle, first ever meeting between these teams. And I said going into this game that it was going to be close. I streamed this game, and I said going in that this was going to be close. Seattle is one of those teams that is very hardworking, despite not really being that great and not being the most talented team. They're very hardworking, and they never give up on a game. Those are 2 very noticeable attributes of the Seattle Kraken this year. And boy, did they come through with this game as far as Seattle living up to those attributes, because after a scoreless first period, Boston gets 2 in the second, goes up 2-0, goes into the third period once again with a 2-goal lead and blows it, almost blows the whole game. Luckily, able to get the power play goal from David Pastrnak in the late in the third, after Seattle had tied it up at 2, and holds on to win the game 3-2. This once again wasn't pretty like the Arizona game, But a win is a win. The 2 points count the same, and the Bruins go into the All-Star break with a W in the win column.
I was very impressed with the Kraken. They played extremely hard throughout the
Yep.
entire game. Even when they were down, they didn't give up. And as you know, I always love to give New England shout outs to on this podcast. So Colin Blackwell, native of Lawrence, Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
he played on Tuesday, and then John's favorite all-time player, Ryan Donato, was also on the ice.
He was on the ice.
So I just for anyone who doesn't know, John is not a fan of Ryan Donato, but I love to see him go on rants about Ryan Donato. But anyway, getting off track here again. There's just so many subplots within each game. I can't keep track. Yeah, no, I thought the Kraken played well. I mean, obviously, they didn't get the win like they wanted, but they gave the Bruins, a good test, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to see honestly what the Kraken can do in the future, because if they keep that identity of nose to the grindstone and gritty, and if they can just add some more finesse scoring potentially, they could be a good team in the coming years for sure.
Yeah, Boston was lucky to win this game because
They
they
really
did
were.
not have a good third period, especially the early part of the third period. They completely took their foot off the gas. They thought that this game was over, and Seattle came right back into it. Donskoy scores 42 seconds into the period. Appleton scores, ties it up at 2. And then it took the late power play with David Pastrnak getting the goal, his second of the game, to give the Bruins a win in this one. And then Boston did get better as the third period went along, but their start to the third was really, really bad. But they got the
Yeah.
win, and I guess that's the important part. We want to see them getting the 2 points. They need the 2 points in the standings, and they got it out of this one.
They got the win, yeah, and I know getting the win is obviously the most important thing at the end of the day, but these last two games against Dallas and Seattle, they didn't really make me feel confident about the Bruins' ability to, put teams away that they're supposed to put away and
Mm-hmm.
compete against tough teams.
I think,
They got the win, but I didn't feel great about it. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think that goes back really the last 5 games, because you could go all the way back to the Anaheim game last Monday.
Yep.
And Anaheim lost in regulation at home. Colorado, they blew the 3-1 lead and lost in overtime. Arizona barely beat, very shaky performance. Dallas, they get destroyed. And then Seattle, similar to me to the Arizona game. Kind of a shaky performance, especially in the third period. They should have won that game a lot more easily than they did, but they made it close and they made it tough on themselves. So really, I think the last 5 games have felt that way for the Bruins, but they've played a ton of hockey. So I think
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a not an excuse, but a reasoning as to why these games, especially as the month has gone along, has probably started to feel this way, because they've played 17 games in a 32-day stretch.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at the Arizona game and then the Seattle game.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two teams with absolutely nothing to lose whatsoever. And
Yeah.
you can bet that, when you're on a team that's losing, you look for the little things. And for this particular week, it was playing the Boston Bruins. You can bet that they probably had the Bruins circled on their calendar for this week. So the fact that, those two teams were kind of just plucky and, wanting to put together a good effort against, a good NHL team in the Bruins, I mean, that could play a factor in it too. So, but you're right. I can't imagine the fatigue that they must be experiencing, and truthfully, this break could not have come at a better time.
Yeah, I mean, the Bruins have got to be happy that we've reached the All-Star break now, because they have a few days off. Bergeron's the only Bruin going to the All-Star game, so it's going to be a big rest for everybody else for the next 5 or so days. And that really did come at the perfect time for the Bruins, because they've played so much hockey over the last month. And overall, they did very, very well over that span. But I think, a chance to just kind of catch your breath, get a few days off, is really going to help the Bruins. And hopefully they can come back from the All-Star break rejuvenated, feeling better, and hopefully they're ready to play because their schedule is not easy coming up. Especially these first couple games after the All-Star break, they've got some really difficult opponents, and we'll talk about that later in the show when we preview the upcoming week. But they got to be ready to go and continue playing the way that they have over this past month to 5-6 weeks.
And you have to wonder if they didn't get that little COVID break. Unfortunately, obviously, we're not rooting for COVID breaks, but that kind of was able to springboard them and get them to right the ship a little bit. You have to wonder if they didn't get that break where the Bruins would be sitting right now.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of those things that we'll never truly know the answer to, but that might have been kind of a blessing in disguise a little bit to hit that reset button, have that time off, and look at the way they've come out of it. I mean, from January 1st on, they've looked like a whole different team, a whole new team. So that might have actually worked out pretty well. Now, I will say, we were talking earlier about Boston and protecting each other and standing up for your teammates and stuff like that. In the Seattle game, we saw a nasty hit from Yanni Gourde on Urho Vakanainen. And in this case, Boston must have heard all the complaining about what happened in Arizona, because in this case, they very much did. They went right after Yanni Gourde. And it was Stephen Fogarty and Curtis Lazar going after Gourde on a face-off after his original penalty or original boarding penalty was up, and then that resulted in also a fight between Forbert and former Bruin Jeremy Lauzon, who dropped the gloves as well. So we kind of got a big scrum/fight out of that, and that was the case of the Bruins doing what they need to do in standing up for their teammate. And it was Curtis Lazar, who's a guy that I think could be a little more involved physically for the Bruins, given his role on the team. And it was good to see him step up and do it in this situation.
It was, and I saw the former fight because I saw 3 fights on the telecast happening at the same time. There was one fight happening over here, one fight over here, and one fight near the board. I think that was Forbert, and I just saw that fight, and I knew it would bring a smile to your face because you love the fights, and I do too. So it was great to see the Bruins kind of get a little bit more involved physically.
Yeah, and actually sticking up for their teammate, which hopefully they continue to do the rest of the way. That's kind of the big thing. And I think they can find it from within. I don't think they necessarily need to go out and make a trade for, somebody. I think they can find it from within. They just have to, as a team, decide that they're going to have the willingness to do it. And against Seattle Tuesday night, they decided that they were going to have the willingness to do it. And it was Fogarty, who's up from the AHL. It was Lazar. It was Forbert. Everybody getting involved there. And that was great to see a team response from the Bruins in that situation.
It really was. And, it showed that they still, no matter what the situation was, or, despite the fact that they lost on Sunday, that they were ready to play in Tuesday's game and that they were engaged and, ready to play. Because I wasn't sure how they would come out against Seattle after the loss against Dallas, and I think that was much more reassuring despite of what happened on Sunday.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So Seattle was the last game, obviously the last Bruins game, last game before the break. They pick up a win, 2 points that we needed in the standings. We got it. That was great. It wasn't pretty, but they got the job done, and that's what matters. So now that we're at the All-Star break, it's kind of a stop point in this. It's a checkpoint of the season. Everybody, there are multiple checkpoints throughout the year. Thanksgiving is usually kind of the first one. Then the Christmas break is a checkpoint. Then the All-Star break is a checkpoint. I would say the next one after the All-Star break is probably the trade deadline. But the All-Star break's a major checkpoint. And so I just kind of want to take more of a reflective overall view of the Bruins, not specifically just the past week or anything, but overall where they're at right now, just overall what we think of the team, and what to look forward to going forward. What's been good, what hasn't been good, what needs to be better. What if there's any additions that need to be made, where is it, things like that. Just kind of a overall review of the Bruins season so far. I want to first talk about just the last 17 games. This January 1st through February 1st stretch, 32 days, 17 games. Boston goes 12-4-1 in those 17 games, which is easily their best stretch of the season. At the same time, 3 of those losses were probably their worst losses of the year. Carolina, Dallas, and then the OT loss to Colorado, blowing a 3-1 lead in the third period, I would count as a pretty brutal one too. So it's kind of weird how they've played their best hockey of the year. They've won a ton of games. Their overall record for the past month has been outstanding, but they've also suffered some of their worst losses of the season over this past month as well, as far as getting blown out of games or blowing leads.
Yeah, and it is really weird when you take a look at it. I mean, overall, I'm honestly pleased with how the Bruins have been playing, particularly as the calendar year has turned. I will say that there are still major holes on this team, specifically defensively,
Mm-hmm.
but overall, I am happy with the way that they've played. They've gotten themselves back into the playoff conversation. They no longer look as sleepy as they did at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
But those losses against Carolina, I'll say Carolina and Dallas really, because the Colorado loss, yes, they blew the lead, but that was against a very good team, so I'll give them a little bit of slack for that, truthfully. But games like Carolina and Dallas are a little bit concerning. It makes me wonder how they're going to do once the competition gets a little bit tougher. Again, fatigue could also factor into
Mm-hmm.
those losses. But overall, I am happy with the way the Bruins stand right now. I want to see continued solid play in the second half of the season. I'd
Yep.
like to see, you know, better defensive play, although I don't really know what they could do at this point in the season besides acquire someone at the trade deadline. I honestly think that what we see is what we're going to get with the defense, and it's just going to be more about patching up the holes
Mm-hmm.
and not completely fixing them, unfortunately, at this point in time. And I'll be interested to see what the Bruins do in terms of trying to fix it. Goaltending, I think the goaltending is good. I think secondary scoring has been better, and the secondary scoring is going to need to really play a big role, especially if the defense continues to struggle. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, so I'll hand over the mic to you, but that's just kind of what I see with this Bruins team. Bottom line here is I don't know how far they will be able to go into the playoffs, but I think it's important to have reasonable expectations, and the lower expectations you set for the Bruins team, the more surprised you'll be when they succeed and
Yes.
and
That's my approach. That's been my approach for years.
go ahead.
Yeah, so there's no doubt they've played great over the past month. I've been very happy. I mean, how could you possibly complain about a 12-4-1 record? I mean, they've played great over the past month. I don't think they're a true cup contender in their current state. You take this roster that they have now, bring that into the playoffs, I don't think they're beating Florida. I don't think they're beating Tampa. I don't think they're beating Carolina. I don't think they're beating Pittsburgh. Maybe not the New York Rangers. Maybe not even Toronto. I think Toronto would be a very close series. There's still, I think, major holes with this team. And if they want to truly contend for a Stanley Cup, they have to add to this lineup. They can't expect this roster to win a cup because I don't think they're a cup level team. Goaltending's been good. I love Ullmark. He's been getting even better as the season's gone along. Obviously, they've brought back Tuukka, but now he's hurt again, so who knows what's going to happen there. He hasn't even been that great when he has played. 2 of the games were pretty bad. 2 of them were good, but 2 of them weren't. Swayman is obviously more than capable of being, the guy to ride along with Allmark, but you kind of brought Tuukka back to be that guy and let Swayman develop a little bit more, but that obviously with Raskow injured isn't happening right now. Goaltending, I don't think they're not going to make a move goaltending-wise. These are their
No.
three goalies. That's who it is. And honestly, I think that their goaltending isn't the big problem. The number one thing for me that this team needs to do is they need to add a top four defenseman. They do not have a D-core right now that is capable of winning a Stanley Cup. They just don't. I mean, it's not to take anything away from guys, but I mean, obviously McAvoy is an absolute stud. He's their number one defenseman. He's one of the best defensemen in the NHL. And there's a big drop-off after that. I mean, when you get down to like Carlo and Grzelcyk and Riley and guys like that, there's a big drop-off there. And Boston is missing a top four defenseman. If you look around the league and look at what these other teams have that Boston's going to be playing against and competing against if in the playoffs, team like Florida, who has Aaron Ekblad and Mackenzie Weegar, who are ridiculously good D pairing. And then, Florida's another team I think that probably should add to their D-core at the deadline, but they've got Gudas, who's having a really big year. They've got Montour, they've got Forsling. They've got a good overall D-core there, but they're anchored by that Ekblad and Weegar pairing, which is certainly better than McAvoy and Grzelcyk, or McAvoy and Riley, or McAvoy and Forbert, whoever they put with McAvoy. Not because of McAvoy, he's right up there with the best in the league. They don't have an elite. They don't have a guy to go with McAvoy to make an elite pairing. Now Tampa doesn't either. They don't play an elite guy with Victor Hedman, but they have Ryan McDonough anchoring the second pair. So now if you're looking at who's anchoring your first pair, in Tampa, it's Victor Hedman. Who's anchoring your second pair, it's Ryan McDonough. That's certainly better than having Brandon Carlo, who I like a lot, but McDonough is better than Brandon Carlo. I mean, that's not even remotely debatable. So Tampa's got a better 1-2 punch on the back end. Carolina, Jacob Slavin, Tony DeAngelo have been incredible this year. Pesce, one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL. Carolina's got a better D-core than Boston. The New York Rangers with Trouba and Fox. And Fox and Lindgren is their top pair. Trouba and Miller is their second pair. That's better than Boston's top four. It's better than the Bruins. Pittsburgh, I think maybe a little bit more of a question there, but Mike Matheson has had a really good year, and that's made Pittsburgh's second pair a lot better. So you've got Letang and Dumoulin as your top pair, which is a very good top pair. Then now you've got Matheson having a really good season. Now, is that better than Boston's? I mean, that remains to be seen. I think that probably is a little bit more of on an equal playing field as far as D-cores go. But it's close. I think if Boston could add a top four defenseman, a legitimate top four guy, whether it's a left shot guy to play with McAvoy like a Jacob Chychrun, or if it's a John Klingberg type who's probably going to be more of a second pair, whoever they add, they could make their D-core significantly better by adding a top four guy. It's not good enough right now.
And it's one of those, and it's one of those things where it's you can add somebody and it will make the defense better. It's not going to be, you add somebody and it's a wasted move or a wasted trade. The Bruins need the depth, and you mentioned all the teams that have depth, even Pittsburgh, which is more of a coin flip in comparison to the Bruins. I mean, even in the playoffs, you can't take the coin flips for a coin flip. You have to, you have to assume that they're going to be tough and gritty. And right now, the Bruins don't have a complete defense, so that's my biggest question mark for this team. And if they can fix that, then I think this conversation will be a little bit different on the next show or whenever they make the move.
Yeah, I think they also need another center. I think they're missing down the middle. Eric Halla is not a second line player, but To me, that's not the biggest issue. I think they have a better chance of getting by and still finding a way to go on a run with their forward group the way that it is now and adding to the D-core than adding a forward and leaving the D-core how it is now. I think the D-core is the biggest issue. I don't think that their D right now is good enough to actually go on a deep playoff run. I think the forward group probably isn't good enough, but they could possibly get by. They have to add to the D, in my opinion, for have any chance of going, conference final or even Stanley Cup final.
And how many more chances are you going to be able to make a deep playoff run with this group?
The window's closing. I
the
mean,
window is
Bergeron
closing.
is about at the end.
Yeah, Bergeron is about at the end, and I don't honestly. He's playing unreal right now, but in terms of just age, Marchand I don't think is too far behind. And when I say too far behind, 4 or 5 years maybe. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe a little bit more.
who knows how long? I mean, Marchand's what, 33 now? Like, who knows
Yeah.
how long he's going to be able to keep this up? And Bergeron, I mean, is getting really close.
Pasta's still in his
Pasta's
late
still
20s,
very,
so, yeah.
very young. So, yeah, Marchand's 33. You got to wonder how much longer is he going to be able to play at an elite level like he is. And Bergeron's 36. And, I mean, you definitely have seen it with Bergeron that, it's not going to last forever. When you don't know what first of all, he doesn't even have a contract for next year. He's going to be a free agent. And second of all, how much longer is he going to be able to keep up being this elite two-way player, both offensively and defensively? I don't think the defensive aspect is ever going to go away, but how much longer is he going to be able to put up the point production that he does? How much longer is he a true number one center? Gotta think that, like, this year, maybe next year would be it. And then once you get to, like, 37, 38, you can't be relying on a guy that old to be your number one center.
I would think that Bergeron would sign a 2-year deal, maybe with the Bruins this offseason.
Yeah.
Or some type of deal to close things out with the intention of closing things out. And damn, that's going to be a tough day when he retires. It really is.
That's going to be brutal.
Yeah, I think we're getting very much near the end for Bergeron. I mean, when he's 38, that'll be, 20 years in the league for him?
Yeah, because he started playing right away when he was drafted.
Yeah, so, I mean, the Bruins are in an interesting spot here. I mean, truthfully, not to go off on another tangent, but there's just so many subplots with this team. It kind of drives me nuts.
Yeah.
When you look at the big picture and you were only able to get one Stanley Cup with some of the groups we've had, it's very, very, very disappointing.
Yeah, and the window's definitely closing with this group because once Bergeron goes and Marchand gets older, you're not just going to be able to replace those guys. I mean, that's going to take some hard work on the front office's part to try and fill those gaps in the lineup. And, I mean, it would take some sort of insanely good trade or a massive free agent signing or something to be able to just kind of replace that. I think the window is drawing to a close somewhat here with this year, next year, like within the next couple seasons. So they got to kind of go for it. Like, if you're going to get that one more cup, you've got to go for it. And I just don't think that this team right now is a cup contending team. I think they're a playoff team, but they're not a true cup contender.
I agree, and it's sad to say because, one cup in since 1972, and not to get all reflective here, but it's just crazy to think about. It really is, because when you look at the 2011 team and then you look at other teams like the 2008, 2009 Bruins, and then, even 2013, 14, I thought was a very good team. And they just haven't been able to get the job done.
Yep.
And I also wonder, you talk about the Bruins beginning to rebuild down the road. I wonder if Don Sweeney will be a part of that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you see general managers, take on new positions especially when there's a rebuild with the team that they're currently, making acquisitions for. A lot of times you'll see general managers, maybe the Bruins want to go in a new direction
Mm-hmm.
and they want a new general manager. So we could see a shakeup down the road, and it's going to be a big one for the Bruins. And I just don't see this season, you know, kind of panning out in terms of a Stanley Cup. I mean, one thing I love about your predictions is that they're sometimes wrong, but I think you're right on the money here. Like you
Oh.
say, like you say things as a pessimist, which I can't blame you at all. And then the Bruins do the absolute opposite, but I honestly think you're out on the money. I don't think the Bruins have what it takes right now, and I don't expect them to make a major move. I hope I'm very wrong. I really
Yeah,
do.
see, I hope they make the major move.
Oh, I do too. I just don't think they will.
Yeah, we'll obviously we'll find
Yeah.
out come trade deadline time, but I just hope that the Bruins make the major move because I think with a good addition or two, they could potentially be a deep run type team, but they're certainly not there. I don't think right now. I think that there would have to be at least one major addition to this lineup, and we don't know if we're going to get it or not. But that's where I think the team is at right now. Obviously, very happy about the past month. They're playing a lot better. They're winning a lot of games, but yeah, I think you get into a set. They're certainly a playoff team. I think they've solidified that. But you get into a best of seven against a top team like Florida or Carolina or Tampa Bay. I just don't see the Bruins winning that series. I don't. I think that those other teams are just too good, and they're better than the Bruins by a substantial margin.
You're seeing all these well-built teams really catch up to the Bruins, and you're also seeing years of not building correctly on the part of the Bruins catch up to them. And we talked about this last summer, and you know, we kind of knew this was going to be an issue because we had this talk last summer.
Yep.
2021, 2022 is going to be the last big year for the Bruins to make a run due to the fact
Yep.
that they have not historically been good at kind of building depth, and now we're doing this show saying exactly that. So, you know, I wish, I wish it would have gone another way. And we're not saying that the Bruins can't win the Stanley Cup. Anything can happen, but you know, I just don't see this roster being able to win a Stanley Cup. I want them to, but I just don't see it.
All right, so one last thing here before we go. I want to look ahead to the next couple of games because obviously we got the All-Star break Thursday through Monday, but then Boston returns to action on Tuesday, February 8th for a makeup game against the Pittsburgh Penguins at home. And then they have to play on Thursday, the 10th, against Carolina at home. And obviously, we know what happened the last time the Bruins played Carolina. It was not pretty. So those are the next two Bruins games before we'll have next week's show coming out the 11th. So Pittsburgh and Carolina, a couple of very tough matchups here, and that's why I was saying earlier that Boston has to be ready to go coming out of this All-Star break. Like, hopefully it's rejuvenating and gives them a little bit of rest and gets their feet back under them because they're going to have to play some really tough games right out of the gate.
How they perform in these two games after the All-Star break, I think will again be another telling sign of what this Bruins team is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are two playoff teams right there,
Yep.
and there's one team there that beat you 6-1 on
7-1 for
7-1.
Carolina.
I forgot a goal for Carolina, but no, I think that's going to be very telling as to how they do because say they win these two games, then that makes you feel a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
See, the Bruins always have a way of sucking you in to make you feel like they can be Stanley Cup contenders
And then lose in the second round of the playoffs.
But anyway, we're getting on another tangent. This episode is bringing out a lot of emotions.
Yes.
And so those two games after the All-Star break, I think will be very telling.
Yep.
If the Bruins lose both, then that is not good at all. Obviously, if they
Yep.
win both, then maybe I can start to really believe in the Bruins as they make their playoff push.
Yeah, I think they're obviously very big games, very big opponents. Home ice, Pittsburgh, very tough team, one of the better teams in the Metro. Obviously, Carolina, arguably the best team in the Metro. Boston's got to show something here. This is another huge test as to, what are the Bruins really? And if they can show up and play well and have great games and at least win one, if not both, against tough opponents like this, then yeah, my belief factor in the Bruins is going to continue to rise and go up. If they lose both of these games, but they're close games, I'll be a little frustrated with it, but at least they kept it close and show that they can play with them. If they get blown out, I mean, you're just proving my point that Boston's not a true cup contender. If they get beaten handily by both of these teams, it just proves that, sure, Boston will make the playoffs, but when they actually have to play a 7-game series against high-quality opponents, they don't really have a shot. And it will just prove what I think about this team in its current state is that they're not going to beat teams like this in a 7-game series.
Yeah, and it's just crazy to think about what a model of consistency the Pittsburgh Penguins have been, even dating back to when we were like freshmen in high school and even before that.
It's been 15 years pretty much for the Penguins.
Yeah, and it's been nuts. And here they are again. It seems like they always, show up when it comes playoff time, and that's a good mark of a veteran team. Will they show up in the big games? And that's going to be one of the biggest questions for the Bruins after the break.
Yeah, absolutely. So these next 2 games are going to be really important, big-time tests for Boston to see where they're really at. And they're going to be tough games for sure. Pittsburgh is not an easy opponent. Carolina, we've already seen this year what they can do. This is actually the last game between the Bruins and the Hurricanes. Carolina's already beat them twice this year by a combined score of 10-1. Carolina's outscored the Bruins 10-1 over their 2 games this season and obviously won both.
Yeah, that's not. That's more like a football score, right, or a very high baseball score.
Yeah, that's a baseball number there.
That certainly doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy heading into the games after the break, but it is going to be a test. I mean, and who knows what is going to happen because I can't figure out this Bruins team, but I'm hoping for a win, and I know we do calculations what we think their record is going to be, and we'll do a show before these games, right? Or we'll have one game in and then a show.
No, Pittsburgh is Tuesday, so we won't have another show. We'll probably record before the Carolina game.
All right, so I'm going to go on record and saying that the Bruins will win the Pittsburgh game, I think.
Okay. I also would very much like to see a win in the Pittsburgh game. So we'll have to see, but I'm hoping for a good, strong comeback from the All-Star break and a big home win over the Pittsburgh Penguins.
We are not in do or die territory yet,
No.
But we're starting to kind of get into those must-win games type of category, I think.
It's a show-me game.
It is a show-me game, but I also think it's a must-win game in the sense that, we need to see what the Bruins can do not when their backs are against the wall because they have been playing well, but 2 losses here, for instance, could start a downward slide and vice versa, So we really want to see the Bruins play well on Tuesday against Pittsburgh for sure.
Definitely. All right, so that's going to bring us to the end here, episode 53 of Black and Gold Weekly. Danny, thank you so much for coming on again. It was awesome to have you and talk some Bruins hockey for another little over an hour today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. What a week, huh?
Yeah.
I can't wait until after the break, and then that's when things I think are going to really, really get interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So we're getting in crunch time in the NHL season now. A little bit of a break with the All-Star break and a chance to stop and catch your breath. But when the Bruins come back from the All-Star break, we're getting into the home stretch of the season. It's crunch time, and it's time to really show what this team truly is and what they're made of, and whether or not they're going to be a team that can actually contend, or if they're going to be a team that is out in the first round and like nothing even really happened. We'll have to see what the Bruins turn into here down the stretch. But Anyway, guys, that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. It was another fun episode, another fun chat here with Danny, talking some Boston Bruins hockey. Please don't forget about the links down in the description of the video, whether it's Boston Bruins apparel, NHL apparel from any team, or NCAA college apparel. It's all down there. If you're in the market for any of that stuff, please check out those links. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. Big thank you to Mark Allred and everybody at Black and Gold Productions. This show would not be happening without them. So huge thank you to them for all of their support. Be sure to check out www.blackandgoldhockey.com to read all the articles and see all the podcasts that the great BNG team is putting out each and every week. And that's pretty much going to do it here. We'll have episode 54 coming up next week. Again, the Pittsburgh game will have happened. We'll be gearing up for, the home stretch of the season. We'll be back into games, back into the action, and we'll see what the Boston Bruins are able to do. But that's going to do it for this week, guys. Thank you again so much. Have a great weekend. Talk to you guys soon.